Welcome to West Country Wanderings, and welcome to one in both my Devon series and railway series. I'm currently here in the South Hams. I do apologise for the traffic noise, but the reason for that will become all too clear shortly. And today we're going to have a look at what remains, or some of the remains, of what was known as the Primrose Line here in the South Hams, because it followed the River Avon through wooded glades going along primroses in the springtime. It was a most pretty line, opened in 1893, but sadly, yes, it closed in 1963. I'm here in the lovely town of Kingsbridge. I'm just opposite Kingsbridge South Hams Hospital on the other side of the road there, and there's a hill that pulls its way up to it joins the main Plymouth Totnes Road at the top there. But at one time, I'm currently standing on the old Plymouth Road here. At one time there were railway tracks underneath this bridge here, and when the line closed shortly afterwards, they built a new road skirting up the hill past the hospital here, and this tunnel here, short tunnel viaduct with the bridge carrying the old Plymouth Road over the top of it, got buried many years ago now. It was completely uncovered, and the Kingsbridge in Bloom committee decided to completely re-excavate this parapet here with the old Plymouth Road going into it and create it as a floor display and entrance gateway to the lovely town here of Kingsbridge in South Devon. Now the station was actually further on round, so if you can imagine the railway tracks going underneath me, and I'll show you a little bit more in a minute, but I'd say I do apologise for the traffic noise. And then it went in a cutting round the back of the hospital where the car park is, round the back of the GP surgery, making its way to Kingsbridge railway station, which is now an industrial site. It used to be there, the station building, up until 2009, and sadly it then became demolished. But we're going to go over there shortly to have a look and see what remains of the site here in Kingsbridge. So after leaving Kingsbridge station, say going on that curve by the GP surgery, which obviously wasn't there then, going underneath the old Plymouth Road, it went through this cutting there. Those houses obviously weren't there then. And shortly after leaving Kingsbridge, it then entered a tunnel, Sawley Tunnel. Now yesterday, because I'm staying in this area for a few days, I went to have a look to see what I could see of that tunnel. Sadly, I didn't have much luck. I'll insert a photograph that I did manage to take it today. It was appalling conditions. It was chucking it down with rain, and the bits where the cutting is, where the railway once went along the valley there, is completely infilled with water, and then there's barbed wire, so you can't get any closer to the tunnel portal. But it does have an interesting history, because at one time, unbelievably, Sawley Tunnel was once the sign of a theme park, the Tunnel Adventure World, Sawley Tunnel Adventure World. I remember seeing the brown tourist signs, but when I arrived in Devon, it had long closed, and now none of it remains. But the tunnel does still stand there, but it is on private land. It was as close as I could get to it, unfortunately. But it remains an interesting place. It's the only tunnel on this 12.5 mile branch line here in South Devon. So South Hams Hospital over there on this opposite side of the Kingsbridge Hill, that's what I was known as. It's probably got another name, but say it is the Plymouth Road, meets up with the main road there. And then you have this lovely site here, which is where the viaduct tunnels were, and they've actually done a recreation of the railway. So they put ballast down and some tracks, even a signal there. I just love that. And Kingsbridge over there. Unfortunately, it is a bit of a noisy site here, so what we're going to do now is we're going to head on down to where the railway station site once was, and it was extensive with a goods shed, carriage sheds, a signal box, and the station buildings. So let's go over there now. So I'm now at the station site, which is now known as Station Yard Industrial Site here, just on the edge of Kingsbridge, and we have a survivor. Yes, it's the goods shed here, which is fantastic to see. Sadly, the station buildings were demolished back in 2009 because they'd fallen in complete disrepair. But this is a really interesting sight to see that this is here. I think there's still an edge of the platform which still exists as well, so let's go in over and see if we can see that now on this site here. So you can just make out along there, it's probably difficult to see though, and even more difficult to photograph, behind this fence is the edge of the platform, and just there underneath the wall with a road, that's the road that goes on to Salcombe, above it there would have been the station building. I'll put in some photographs now so you can see what the site here at Kingsbridge railway station looked like. It's not a great place to do vlogging around here because lots of noise, industrial sites. So what I'm going to do now is go over to one of the former railway stations. Now there were 3 intermediate stations before it met up with the main line, and when we get to somewhere quieter we'll have a look at that. And that first station that we're going to have a look at is called Loadswell. If you're from Devon, some people pronounce it Lodgeswell, which is the way it's pronounced, but it's pronounced Loadswell, and all 3 intermediate stations exist, and all 3 of them have been completely restored. So let's go over to Loadswell now and have a look at the station site and where the railway once was, once here on the Primrose Line, and I'll tell you then a little bit more about its history. Now the station here at Loadswell, which is actually just up there, I'll show it you shortly, wasn't a huge success because the village of Loadswell is about a mile away. In fact, most of it is up a very steep hill. It's actually closer to a village called Woodley, where there's a nice little church. Anyway, that's not for now. I'm just walking down here though, you'll probably be able to hear the River Avon. So the railway follows the Avon Valley all the way till it gets to the village of South Brent, where it met the South Devon railway mainline. But here, just coming up, is still a fantastic bridge. I can see a head capacity sign there, 12 foot 6 inches is the maximum height through the bridge, but it is superb. It's complete, and although it was single track line, apart from bits and pieces where there were passing places and 2 track sections, this is double track bridge. So as you can see, it's a magnificent construction. It looks like the brickwork has been repaired and maintained. It looks like it certainly has been remortared, carrying the Primrose Line on top of it. Now, in case you're wondering, there are a couple of other features between here, this location at Loadswell, and Kingsbridge, where we were back at the station yard there. It's difficult to get to them if you're travelling by car. This isn't a Lost Railway walk today because all of the bits I'm going to show you are quite fragmented, so I'm using my car to get between one and the other, and you can't walk all of the railway track, although you can walk part of it, which is what we're going to be doing shortly. So after leaving Kingsbridge on the Loadswell Road, you'll come to a railway parapet where the railway went underneath the road there, and then further on you'll see parts of a bridge, you'll see parts of the abutments of the bridge just before the Orne Valley Meats shop there. There's a farm shop there just down on the right as you approach the village of Loadswell here. Now, though you have the restored platform buildings here, which is to say is a private residence now, you have this building. It's marked as a plate layers hut, but I think it may have actually been a weighbridge for the goods here. Goods actually closed here in 1961, 2 years before the passenger services ended, and also from that time it became an unstaffed halt. Prior to that there were staff here at Loadswell. So the station itself is just through the trees there, and the track goes through the garden. Obviously that's private. We're going on a public footpath along the side of the garden, so if we follow it downhill we will meet up with the track bed. So for the first time now walking on the track bed of the Primrose Line since we left the town of Kingsbridge. This is the first bit of right of way, gives you access to it, and then the other bits heading out of the town will enable you to do that. And the trackway actually crosses over the River Avon no less than 10 times, and I think a little bit further over here you can see an abutment where there was once a bridge over the River Avon. So we'll see if we can find that. So how did this line come about? Well, it started in the 1840s with the arrival of the South Devon Railway between the cities of Exeter and Plymouth. And when that line was built, a station was opened at a place called Rankton. And Rankton is an important part of our story here in South Devon. That became the railhead for the entirety of the South Hams, so places like Kingsbridge, Totnes, Dartmouth and Ivybridge, although later Ivybridge had its own railway station, and it still does because that reopened again I think in the 1990s. Well, it's a little bit muddy here as we make our walk along. But yes, it's a delightful woodland here, and the people that lived in the South Hams were very desirous of having their own railway. So places like Newton-Abbot were getting a lot of the action with the GWR arriving there and all the railway works associated with that, the benefits to the cities, and the South Hams felt they're a little bit left behind. 5 years after the line opened, there was a meeting in 1854 to see the best way to connect it up. There were a couple of routes planned, none of which came to fruition. There was an ambitious scheme to link it from the Tor Bay area, which would have been lengthier and more costly of construction. There was another meeting again in 1864, but again nothing materialised out of that. Some funds were raised for local business people, but still nothing came to fruition. It wasn't until the 1880s when an Act of Parliament to open a line from the village of South Brent down to Kingsbridge came to fruition. And it wasn't until 1893 that the whole thing opened. Originally there were plans to extend the line south from Kingsbridge to, a bit wet with the leaves on my head, to Salcombe, which is a real tourist mecca. It was then, it is now. In fact, what happened after the line opened to Kingsbridge, there were GWR coaches to take the passengers, the tourists, on to Salcombe. And for indeed much of its life, the Primrose Line was very much embedded, not with agriculture or industry, but providing the needs of tourism. It was never a particularly busy line, generally busier in the summer months than in the winter months, but it did take some traffic off local roads and encourage tourism growth into the South Hams, and it also provided a useful facility for the people living in Kingsbridge and the other villages en route to South Brent to get to other places like Exeter, Plymouth and Torquay to visit friends, family and to do their shopping as well. Now, can you imagine what an absolute delight it must have been to have travelled on a train on the Primrose Line through this beautiful Avon Valley, the river running alongside you, particularly in the springtime with, yes, primroses out, but other flowers as well. It just must have been an absolute magical experience. Now, the GWR were conscious of the fact that it was mainly a tourist line, but also local people as well. But in terms of tourism, to that end, they provided camping coaches. I think they started in the 1930s, and they had them here at Loadswell, but also at another station which we're going to be having a look at next, at Gara Bridge. And there are a couple of photographs, I think, in existence showing you what the camping coaches were like. I certainly would love to have stayed in one of those right next to the Primrose Line here in Devon. Now, though it seems rather unlikely, a beautiful spot here in the Avon Valley, but this railway once had a couple of connections, well, 3 connections to the Second World War. And the first one involves that tunnel I mentioned, Sawley Tunnel. I think it was around 1942 that a train was travelling, and I think it was heading from Kingsbridge, heading up to Brent, South Brent, and it became aware that it was under aerial bombardment. And the engine driver thought he would head for the tunnel. Got inside Sawley Tunnel, which is, I think, just under 3/4 of a mile long, and then slammed the brakes on inside the security of the tunnel. And while he was in there, he could hear heavy bombardment above him. They were trying to blow up the tunnel under railway, but they didn't succeed. They sheltered inside that tunnel for a couple of hours before hearing no more aircraft, no more bombs, and continued their journey. So it was Sawley Tunnel that saved them. Incredible to think that, and it's really hard to imagine that in this beautiful and quiet spot today. And the other connections to the Second World War both involve Field Marshal Montgomery, and the reason for that is he used the line to review the troops. There was a lot of activity in this area with troops, both British and American, and he used the line again, and this time it was for Exercise Tiger. And if you don't know about Exercise Tiger, I actually made a video about that some 3 years ago now, which is just further down the coast at Slapton, and I'll put a link to that video at the end of this one. Well, I'm going to return to my car now. Haven't actually found the bridges yet, but we've still got some more exploration to do. So we're going to stop off at Gara Bridge, and also a strange place called Topsham Bridge, which is nowhere near Topsham. I don't quite know why it was called that, but we'll have a look at that area as well as Avonwick, and finally we'll conclude the video in the village of South Brent. So I'll see you in a bit. Well, I've now come around to a location called Topsham Bridge. So it's nowhere near Topsham in East Devon, but it has a beautiful bridge over the River Avon, road bridge. It's a very difficult place to get to. It has one road in, one road out, both extremely narrow. In fact, at one point I had to go kind of in the hedge to get around a fallen tree in the car. Interesting experience. But the railway passed nearby here as well, and we're going to have a look at that now. Been looking at the map, and it's difficult to work out the exact route of where the railway once was here, so let's go and explore it together here at Topsham Bridge. As you can see, it's the most beautiful spot here in wonderful South Devon in the South Hams. That again is our River Avon, but the railway was actually on the other side of the river, so let's go over and cross the bridge now. Before I do so, I want to give a shout out to one of my regular commentators here on West Country Wanderings, and that's Caroline, who had a relative that lived here at Topsham Bridge, and the railway actually went through the bottom of their garden. Yes, and so the railway did indeed cross over the River Avon here. Fantastic, and still standing railway bridge over the River Avon. That's just wonderful, isn't it? That's this curious little passageway underneath the railway track bed here as well. I think it's just probably for a drainage channel, though you could have made your way from the other side of the tracks by scrabbling underneath it, I guess. And there's our railway track bed heading north in the direction of Gara Bridge, which is our next station stop. We look down here, we can see that the Kissing Gate is made out of both broad gauge and standard gauge rails. And if we come round the other side of the railway track, get a better view of the railway bridge with that wood that has been swept down when the rain was higher, or the flow was higher should I say, and it's leaning against the abutment of the bridge. Now I was just about to return to my car, but I think I've discovered the remains of a hinge of a level crossing gate. So let's just pan back so you can see. So I think our railway through Topsham Bridge came up through here. And in fact, you can see the arm of it there. That piece of metal would have been supporting the level crossing gate. And I think our railway come across here and across the road through there. And obviously that wasn't built there. Where that lamp is now, I think, is the course of our railway. So you can actually make out the fact that the road here flattens off, which is where the railway tracks would have gone across it, and it dips either side where the level crossing was here at Topsham Bridge. So it's good to see this intact here at Topsham Bridge, but where we're going to make our way on now in the northerly direction to Bridge, and then continuing making our way on northerly direction to the end of our journey at South Brent, where we join the South Devon Railway. So I'm at the beautiful Bridge. Lovely humpback bridge. It is actually a B. I think it's, I'm not sure if it's a B road, but it's a brown marked road on the OS map. So there's more traffic here, a bit noisier than what we've seen. But once you get away from the traffic, this is a super location. And it was around about here that the GWR once had camping coaches on the Primrose Line in the 1930s. Must have been a fantastic location to have had a holiday here right next to the River Avon. And so that there is Bridge Station, which has been completely restored and is now a private residence, so I don't want to get too close to it. But it wouldn't hereabouts there would have been another level crossing taking you across the road and, well, basically through that gate in that direction there. What a delightful spot this must have been, just to spend a week here in a camping coach. Been positively idyllic, I would have thought. Just over this fence here, you can just make out the edge of the platform, so our track railway would have been going along the top there, with the station just there on the left and the river on the right. So tearing myself away from the beautiful location that is Bridge in the depths of the Avon Valley, now going to go on to our final intermediate station, and that is at Avonwick, which has also been restored. I think it's right next to the road that heads into the centre of the village. It's slightly outside of the village itself, and there is another bridge in that area as well. And then we'll go on to South Brent. Now in the village of Avonwick. The centre of the village is over that way, but the railway station is a bit further on along this road. And as you've probably already worked out by now, the railway went on a bridge over the road here, which leads on to the village of Dipford. But we're going to head back that way to see what we can see of the station, bearing in mind it is a private residence, but it is close to the road. And in that direction, where the Totnes Road, the Plymouth Totnes Road, goes over the River Avon, also there is a railway bridge as well, so maybe we'll have a look at that in a bit. Looks like recently clearance work has taken place on these abutments on both sides, and a new fence, you just make it out there, it's been placed on top of it. I don't know what 20.5 refers to. As I say, our railway line is about 12.5 miles long. Coping stones are still, well, slightly dislodged, that one. But other than that, the abutments are in very, very good order. And that's looking in the other direction. As I say, went across the Dipford Road on a diagonal basis. Now here at Avonwick, you've actually got these finials were these once atop a semaphore on the Primrose Line? I'd like to think so. If you do know that, again, usual thing, drop a comment below. Now, just in the field down here is this. That there, which I think was possibly a weighbridge. It's very similar to the one we saw at Loadswell earlier. Also in the driveway are some rails, which are here, or rather one rail. It's not in its original position because the track would have come along here. So there's some garage units over there, and the track would have just been the other side of this outhouse, which wouldn't have been there. And there, you can just see, is the edge of the platform. Let's go around the front. So there is Avonwick's railway station. There is a greyer building there, which is I believe that's a newer addition. But this would have been the main passenger building for any passengers that would have used the facilities here on the Primrose Line. It's great to see it restored, isn't it? Also, the station's actually just a bit outside of the village. We're at a place called Benwick Knoll here. I'm not sure why it was sited a bit further away from where the Totnes Plymouth Road is, where the garage and the Avon Inn is. But it's here anyway. It's a flattish walk from the centre of the village. So it's not like what we saw at Loadswell. We've got that great big steep hill to take you up to the village from the station. But isn't that wonderful to see that here on the Primrose Line in Devon? Now I'm just going to walk down a bit further down along the fence line along there and just see what we can see looking in a opposite direction, if you like. And from this direction you clearly make out the edge of the platform there. Obviously we can't go in there, the other side of the fence line. This is the road here, the Dipford Road, and there's the fence line. It's private property, so please don't encroach on that if you do to come to visit Avonwick Station for yourselves. But it is wonderful to see it completely restored. Magnificent sight. If we look back further from this angle, you can see the canopy just there, which is now like a conservatory from the building. Well, that's really terrific. That must be amazing to live there. It's a fairly quiet spot as well. Well, we're going to continue on now to South Brent. I just noticed something else through the trees there. Looks like there's that a remains of a footbridge. You probably won't be able to make it out there. There's certainly something railway-like there. Was there a footbridge here at Avonwick? I'll insert some old photographs of it now, but we're going to head on now to South Brent. So I've now come round to South Brent, or Brent as GWR called it, and this is where our Primrose Line joined the main South Devon line between Exeter and Plymouth. So Exeter, we're looking in the direction of Exeter here, but our line, it's really difficult to make out, but it came in kind of there. It actually left the Avon River at a place called Horsebridge, because at Horsebridge, for the remainder of its journey to the main line, it followed the Horse Brook, and it came in like kind of in a little curve around kind of Palestone, that area, which has been built over now, so there's no way you can actually gain access to the track or see any of the original route. It'll be completely overgrown and there's no right of way to it. But on the other side of the bridge is the site of where Brent Station once was. So let's go and have a look at that now. So we're now looking in the direction of Plymouth, and this was the site of Brent Station. In fact, the red brick building on the left-hand side is my dentist. Yes, Primrose Junction is the name of the dentist. It's my dentist there. And so yeah, this is Brent Station Bridge East, We're looking across to Brent Station Bridge west at the moment, but this was where the layout was, and you can just make out the edge platform, I believe, just along there. Not a great deal else to see, but we will continue on down to the other overbridge. So we're now looking at the former station yard, with the wall of the station yard run along this side, and one of the station building there, Primrose Station Building, which, as I say, now is a dentist, and my dentist. And here we are looking back down at the Brent station site. Still no idea why it's called Brent instead of South Brent. But yeah, there it was. There is a campaign to reopen the station again here. I think it's a good idea because, again, it would be a useful railhead for the South Hams. There is a station at Ivy Bridge, which is a little bit more to the east, but if you kind of live in the Kingsbridge area, this is easier to access and use. In fact, the main line goes back over the River Avon at this point here, over a short viaduct. You can just see the rails and the parapet of it there, just on the left in the middle of the screen. Well, I've just crossed over the delightfully named Lydia Bridge, which takes us from one part of Devon, namely the South Hams, which we've been following the River Avon up through to this village here, the South Brent, into Dartmoor, which you can see behind me. And it's on Dartmoor that the River Avon rises. In fact, there's a dam. You can follow it on a footpath all the way from South Brent up onto the Dartmoor Hills, and then you can see the reservoir on the top there. It's a delightful spot. Don't have time to do that today, but I do hope to return to Dartmoor in the springtime, hopefully in the early spring, to film another railway, or rather tramway and canal, to tell you the story about the Haytor tramway, have a look at the relics of that, and the Stover Canal, which once took granite from the top of Dartmoor down to the South Devon coast. So that'll hopefully happen on the channel next year. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed it. This time looking at the Primrose Railway and the relics of the former railway from the main line here in South Brent down to the lovely town of Kingsbridge in the South Hams. I've actually filmed a separate video about Kingsbridge, so if you want to have a look around Kingsbridge, that'll be a separate video. Not sure if it'll be arriving before or after this one, but I will, if it comes after, subsequently link it to this one. It's well worth exploring around Kingsbridge. Until next time on West Country Wanderings, take care of yourselves, look after yourselves, and I hope to see you on the channel again very, very soon. All the best for now. Cheers. Goodbye.